Annette Dionne passed on Christmas Eve at age 91. She was the last surviving sister of the world-famous Dionne Quintuplets. I thought this would be a good time to revisit their story, a Canadian story. I'm Larry Fedorik, and this is Later That Same Life. On each episode of my weekly podcast, a different topic, discussion, commentary, or story from our lives.
Season 19, Chapter 5.
The Dionne Quintuplets. Let me get this out of the way right off the top. For the duration of this podcast, I'm going with quintuplets, as opposed to some who say quintuplets. I don't think so. I agree that it's quadruplets, but anything after that is uplets. All right, done. The Dionne Quintuplets. The five sisters were probably the first Canadians to gain worldwide fame and notoriety. Oh, sure, previously Alexander Graham Bell had invented the telephone, James Naismith came up with basketball, and Mary Pickford was a big movie star. But to that point, no Canadians had completely captured global attention like the Dionne Quintuplets, famous by virtue of being born. Emily, Marie, Yvonne, Cecile, and Annette were born May 28, 1934, near the village of Cobeil, Ontario, which is minutes outside of North Bay. They were the first quintuplets known to survive infancy. The Dionnes, Oliva, and Elzire already had 5 children by the time the Quints arrived. There was a 6th who had died in infancy. 5 kids, suddenly 10. And by the way, eventually 14 children part of that family. The quintuplets were like the middle 5. 14. You know, in the day, latex condoms had been around for at least a decade. So had an upstart organization known as Planned Parenthood. But the Dionnes were Catholic, so even if they knew about these things, it would not have been part of their faith. Several years after the quintuplets' birth, medical experts determined through genetic testing that the sisters were in fact identical, meaning they were created from one single egg cell. Further, Elzire told doctors that in the 3rd month of her pregnancy, she experienced severe cramps and had passed a strange object, which some thought might have been a 6th fetus. The birth of 5 babies was a shock to everyone, although Elzire said that she felt she may have been carrying twins. News of this incredible birth traveled quickly, even in 1934 media speed. It was in all the papers, extra, extra, read all about it, and of course radio. But in the day before the advent of television, patrons flocked to the cinema, and before the feature film watched the Movie Tone News, or the Universal and Paramount newsreels. In the UK there was the Pathé Animated Gazette before the movies. The movie newsreel, and it was dominated that year by these moving pictures of the 5 babies, born all at once to one mother. Important to note also that 1934 was the height of the Great Depression. Times were tough for everyone, not much less an Ontario farmer with 10 kids. The movie newsreels caught the attention of the Chicago World's Fair, who offered Oliva cash to display the 5 babies at the exposition. He agreed. But then there was this public outcry. Can you imagine a public outcry accomplished without social media? Nevertheless, the outcry prompted the Ontario government to get involved. The Dionnes took advice from a local doctor and their parish priest. Oliva then declared his Chicago contract invalid because, well, the wife didn't sign it. The Chicago World's Fair disagreed. The compromise was that Oliva and Elzire would make stage appearances at the fair on their own as parents of the famous incubator babies. The 1935 Ontario Liberal government, under Premier Mitchell Hepburn, made Emily, Marie, Yvonne, Cecile, and Annette wards of the Crown until they were 18 years old. They appointed a board of guardians who met monthly. The father, Oliva, was on that board, but rarely attended meetings, feeling that his vote on matters of his own children would not be important against those other government officials on the panel. He was right. The official reason given for this guardianship was to protect the quintuplets from private exploitation. Sounds good, except for the fact that the Ontario government then proceeded to profit from the quints as a major tourist attraction. The government established Quintland, a purpose-built compound in the town of Cobeil, where tourists could see the girls play in the Defoe Hospital and Nursery. For a fee, people could observe the girls from a covered arcade behind one-way glass. The compound also had an outdoor playground, including space for public observation. Here is a Pathé movie newsreel from 1937.
Once again, we take you to see the 5 stars. And nowadays, selling Dionne souvenirs is a thriving trade. But while they wait outside, we go in to find the 2.5-year-old little girls enjoying the final dip of the season in their own private bathing pool. That's Yvonne, with the ribbon in her hair. She's generous. But then they're all generous. In the play yard, Yvonne takes the center of the stage. And already she's got that film star smile. Mary tests out an unbreakable doll. And boy, is she tough. I said she was tough. She's going to be a cowgirl when she grows up. A ride on the go-kart is very nice, but getting off is another story. Mary wants the table all to herself for a little physical exercise. Now look what you've done. So girls, if you want to keep that quintuplet figure, here's how. And with playtime over, it's back to the nursery, until we all meet again in Pathé Gazette.
At one time, the area rivaled Niagara Falls as Ontario's top tourist destination. According to the sensibilities of the day, and certainly outwardly, it seemed like a good idea, a fine time for the tykes. After all, they were plucked from poverty. They were living in a compound built especially for them, 24-hour care, their health and nutritional needs met to the utmost.
Pictures you have all wanted to see, taken at the humble Dionne farmhouse in Ontario's isolated bush, the home of the world-famous quintuplets. Father Dionne 31 and Mother Dionne 24 are assisted by this boy maturely born. And it is the only case on record in which all the quintuplets lived more than 50 minutes.
Here is something of a special interest to mothers. Every day, each baby is carefully bathed in olive oil to prevent her tender skin from chafing. And this is the daily weighing which you read about in the papers, the most important check on the quintuplets' progress, for the gain or loss of just 1 ounce is significant. Look at little Emily. She enjoys dressing up just like any woman, while her sisters yell for attention too. But now it's feeding time, and the babies are put back into the incubators, ready for a hearty meal. The quintuplets are fed human milk, brought from hospitals in Toronto and Montreal. They also like specially prepared tomato juice.
And perhaps, as toddlers, they were largely unaware of their global status. But they would soon realize that their lot in life was different from other kids. In later years, the sisters would remember those days as a lost childhood. Their unique situation became more evident as they reached school age and then adolescence. Each birthday marked by the whole world, more tourists, more newsreel cameras. The quintuplets starred in 3 Hollywood movies, which were essentially fictionalized versions of their story. They played the Wyatt quintuplets in 3 feature films, The Country Doctor and Reunion, both from 1936, and 1938's 5 of a Kind.
The Federal Broadcasting System announces the scoop of the season, the thrill of the year, the entertainment event you've been waiting for. 5 of the world's most popular and beloved stars, brought to you by our famous news commentator, Miss Christine Nelson.
This is Christine Nelson bringing you the newsreel of the air from Moosetown, Canada. Today, for the first time, you will hear those 5 little international sweethearts broadcasting directly from their play yard in the Luke Hospital.
In the first 2 films, they didn't really act, as one might expect from 2-year-olds, Basically, all the footage that included them was filmed at the nursery in Ontario and showed them playing and interacting. The story of those movies didn't focus that much on the children as they did on the heroic doctor who delivered them. A 1939 documentary, 5 times 5, was nominated for an Oscar for Best Short Subject. And over the decades, their story continued to fascinate. The National Film Board of Canada produced a documentary in 1978, as did the CBC years later. Canadian historian Pierre Burton wrote a book about them. There was a 1994 CBS mini-series starring Beau Bridges called $1 Million Babies. In 1965, the sisters actually published their own book called We Were Five. More recently, 2019, a book by Sarah Miller called The Miracle and Tragedy of the Dionne Quintuplets has become known as the definitive telling of their story. And let's get back to that story. The dad, Oliva Dionne, received a salary of $100 a month for being on that board of guardians. It was Dr. Alan Roy Defoe who was the greatest beneficiary of this unique birth.
Washington, D.C. You remember that famous little Canadian doctor whom you first saw in Pathé News? Dr. Defoe, renowned the world over for his skill in keeping the 5 Dionne babies alive? Well, here he is, surrounded by reporters as he arrived at the nation's capital after his first airplane ride. Dr. Defoe visited the White House, where he talked with President Roosevelt, a modest country doctor, the hero of his profession.
The Defoe Hospital and Nursery was built mainly with monies from the Red Cross and the Ontario government. It was Dr. Defoe who basically fashioned it into Quintland and took in millions in revenue over the years. The compound included a private school set up mainly for the 5 famous females, which they attended until age 9. In 1943, after a long legal battle, Oliva and Elzire regained custody of their 5 identical children. And remember, there would have been a total of 14 kids at this point. And they attempted to live life as a normal family. Some of the sisters would recall later in life that there was nothing about that time that felt normal. It felt forced, according to Annette. Any chance of normal had long since passed. Plus, they would say later in their book that their parents continued to exploit them for profit, scheduling them for rehearsed appearances in front of cameras, selling them out for product endorsements, and basically any way to make a buck. And in their book, the sisters said they never really saw any of that money.
The Dionne Quintuplets are getting quite big girls now, and here they are with Mom and Pop at a charity rally in Toronto. And do they know how many quins make 5? They know anyway that the Dionne Fivesome is a big draw wherever it appears. So the quins thrill the queues at the zoo. People pay their money not to see the quirk or the quagger, but the quins. And now what about a quintet, quins?
During that time back at home, they did complete their education in public schools in the area. And at age 18, moved to Montreal and began an earnest attempt at a private life away from the spotlight. That was 1952. They maintained minimal contact with their parents. Incidentally, their father lived until 1979. Their mother passed in 86. 3 of the sisters eventually married and had children. Marie had 2 daughters, Annette had 3 sons, Cecile had 5 children, including twin boys who died at 15 months. Emily Dionne was the first quintuplet to pass in 1954 at age 20. She had dedicated her life to becoming a nun, but was prone to epileptic seizures. There was a rule she was not to be left unattended at the convent. But one night, the nun assigned to watching her thought she was just asleep, so she left to go to Mass. Emily had a seizure, ended up suffocating.
These are the first films ever taken of the Dionne Quins, the world's most famous babies. Annette, Yvonne, Marie, Emily, and Cecile. This was 20 years ago. Today there are only 4. Emily is dead.
By 1970, Marie was living alone in an apartment, and after her sisters hadn't heard from her for a few days, a doctor was sent in. Marie passed in 1970 of a blood clot on the brain. By the 1990s, after divorces, the three surviving sisters, Annette, Cecile, and Yvonne, lived together in a Montreal suburb. Yvonne lost her battle with cancer in 2001 at age 67. About a month after their 91st birthday in 2025, Cecile passed, and then, as mentioned, Annette on Christmas Eve. And though all of the Dionne quintuplets have now left us, it's not the end. There's all of those siblings, by the way, none of which are still alive, but, they all had families. There were the sisters' own offspring, a lot of extended family, and of course this incredible story that will continue to be told and retold for a long, long time. Then there's the non-profit Dionne Quintuplets Museum in North Bay, housed in the original family cabin, which has been moved several times over the years. It currently operates on a very limited schedule and features many quintuplet childhood artifacts. The Dionne Quintuplets Heritage Board has a website, DionneQuintsHome.com, and that has more information. The Dionne Quintuplets Trust Fund was so exploited over the years that, as mentioned earlier, the sisters saw almost nothing. In the 90s, the three surviving sisters sued the Ontario government over the exploitation as wards of the Crown. And in 1998, Yvonne, Cecile, and Annette were awarded $4 million. $4 million. Though a nice tiny sum, even, split three ways, hardly seems fair, does it? I mean, people made millions from them. Millions in 1934 dollars. How much are the sins of the past worth? I don't know. In this case, seems like it should be a heck of a lot more than $4 million. The Dionnes were the first quintuplets to survive infancy. Again, born in 1934. The next surviving all-girl quintuplets after the Dionnes were the Hanson Quints. They were from the UK, born in 1969. As fertility medications evolved over the years, the first surviving U.S.-born quintuplets were the Kynast Quints in 1970. The Granata Quints were born in Ohio in 1981, 3 boys, 2 girls. Some may remember them from their appearance on Oprah. The Forgy Quintuplets were born in Ottawa in 1987, first Canadian quintuplets since the Dionnes. You may know of a show on TLC called Outdaughtered. It is about the Busby family quintuplets in Houston, Texas. That show went on for 9 seasons from 2016 to 2024. It's on a hiatus, no plans right now for any new shows. In one way, it seems exploitive. On the other hand, they seem like a nice family, and maybe they needed the money just to survive. Hard to tell. And of course, back in late 1997 in Des Moines, Iowa, the famous McCoy septuplets. Sep, that's 7. 4 boys, 3 girls. World's first surviving septuplets. And think about it. They're all pushing 30 right now. Famously, Yvonne, Cecile, and Annette Dionne wrote an open letter to the McCoys, warning them against allowing too much publicity for the children.
It was not human thing that happened to us. And we don't want it to happen again with more other children.
In 2009, with the help of in vitro fertilization, there were the Suleiman octuplets. 6 males, 2 females in California. There have been other octuplets, even a few cases of non-tuplets. 9. But in those cases, not all survived. Any multiple human births beyond 9 are the stuff of myth. Most of those legends long ago debunked. The Dionne Quintuplets. They will always be known as the first and certainly the most famous. The last sister passing Christmas Eve weeks ago. And as I said, it's the end of an era, a chapter, if you will, but not the end of a story. Their story lives on. I hope, too, that the lessons learned will also stay with us.
Already they were wealthy, for the Ontario government had set up a trust fund for them. Wherever they went, whatever they did, pressmen would be there. Soon, Yvonne became their leader, Emily, the mimic of the family, Marie, the quiet one, Annette, the strongest, and Cecile, the singer. And then one day, the five sisters, quite unaffected by all the publicity, celebrated their 7th birthday. They were growing up fast.
Later That Same Life is written, voiced, and produced by Larry Fedoruk. LarryFedoruk37@gmail.com. Subscribe to Larry's podcast YouTube channel. Get automatic notifications with each new episode.